morning, everyone. So first of all, thank you very much, Your Excellency, for being here with us. I know you're a very keen traveler, and this is your first time in London. So we are very pleased, actually, to welcome you here at the London Business School. So ahla wa sahlan. Thank you very much.
Thank you for hosting me.
So before we begin, I'd like to introduce myself, briefly. So I'm Cina. I'm EMBA Global 2020, so with London Business School and Columbia Business School. And I'm also a startup founder myself. I started 13 months ago in incubation as well. And I have Algerian heritage, so this is very much a double honor to have you here as, coming from Algeria and Ministry of Startup. So what I would like to do is to introduce yourself, first of all. Introduce you. So you have a very interesting background. So you first, started in math. You have more like as a scientific background. You have a PhD in medicine. In tech, you started 2 successful companies yourself, and now you are in politics. So I just want to touch down a little bit about, that journey. And for people who are not familiar with Algeria and the Hirak movement, which took place in 2019, this was the largest popular uprising, which took place for 10 months, right, across all of Algeria, with millions of people demanding more democracy and change. And what is interesting is you were there, you took part of that. So we'd like really to ask you how we move from a tech, medicine, politics, but then going through the Hirak yourself.
That's an interesting question indeed. So morning everyone, I'm very pleased to be here in this very beautiful and sunny day. I know that most of you would prefer to be outside, but yeah, we'll try to do it quick. So I think the best way to describe what I've been doing in the last few years is I've been a real outsider. So I think like something somewhere went wrong in my life. So, being an entrepreneur with in the tech sector without tech background, and also a politician without politics background, it feels like a glitch in the matrix, right? But at the end of the day, I think that it's very interesting to have like multiple backgrounds, because you learn a lot of things and you see things differently from people which just come from the same background. So as you mentioned, I am a PhD in medicine. I have been a tech entrepreneur. I created 3 companies. 2 of them became quite successful in Algeria. I also have been part with many other Algerian people in Hirak. I don't know if many of you know. Do you know Hirak? Okay, so I think it's one of the most interesting and beautiful forms of protests for democracy that the world has ever seen. At some point, it was called the Flower Revolution, because the protesters used to give flowers to police, and it was quite surprising, because it went peacefully. We managed to get a lot of change in the system, and I think one of the most interesting results of the Hirak is the fact that today there is a lot of outsiders inside the government and the administration. The other interesting thing is that at the same time, the Hirak in 2019, there were, for example, in France, the Gilets jaunes protests.
Yeah. The yellow vest that they also called here.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So people were like comparing between what was happening in Algiers at that time, which was a very peaceful, protests that went very smoothly, and it was really, very well managed by the police. compared to what happened in other countries. So we really, I think at that time we gave the world a strong message of at what extent, you know, people can contribute to achieve real democracy. So I'm not saying that we achieved, you know, the perfect democracy or something like that. We are aware that there are still a lot of things to do, but the fact that, you know, people from the civil society, from the private sector, are currently included in the government is, I think, something very, very positive and something that we should be proud of. The other thing is that all my teammates also come from the Iraq. So I had the opportunity to start a ministry from scratch. I often call my ministry a startup, because it really started like a startup. I was alone, so I didn't, you know, took a position in an existing ministry, which is something very interesting, you know, creating I have been creating, you know, companies, but I never created the ministry. So it's quite different. I had to learn new things and to learn how the administration works. And I'm surrounded by a couple of very talented people. Some of them are in this room. When I was appointed, I was 26. It's quite young for a minister, even in my country. Now I'm getting older, actually. I'm 30. So at the beginning, I was the only one in my ministry, and of course, the youngest one. Currently, I'm maybe one of the oldest one in my ministry. So the average age at our ministry is 29. So it's also quite young for, you know, for a team. And most of my teammates, I love to call them teammates, you know, come either from the private sector or from the academia. And almost no one come from the administration, which is also something very disruptive. And before we started this, you know, interesting conversation, I was mentioning the fact that we really should put more private people, guys, inside the administration, for a very simple reason. You know, when you are on the private sector, your main focus is how to achieve your objectives. And, you know, it's not important. The way of achieving objectives is not important. When you come from the administration, the most important thing is to respect procedures. So even if at the end of the day, the objectives are not, you know, reached, as long as the procedures are respected, people from the administration are good. And that's why I think that, you know, it's kind of disruption to come from the private sector and to bring this fresh air to a very conservative administration. So that's basically myself. I'm maybe the least interesting person in my ministry. I have very interesting guys here who come from different backgrounds, and they all have had their salaries cut in, you know, 2 or 3 by joining the ministry. So I'm making people poor. But you know, it's like, you know, they do it because they believe in it, and we believe that change always come from minorities. So change always come from small teams. Change cannot come from, you know, majorities. And that's why, you know, creating this, I was mentioning yesterday, that creating this ministry is like, you know, one of the proof that things are changing in Algeria, and we are on the crossroads of everything that's happening in the last few years in the politics in Algeria.
Yeah, thank you very much, Your Excellency. So this is really this hunger for change that you have brought in from the Iraq in the ministry. So that's really good. So that takes us to, you know, talking about Algeria itself. So yesterday during your keynote, you did mention that Algeria is the largest country in Africa. And for decades it had, because it's a very rich country in hydrocarbons, that it's been relying on these resources for decades. So it was really close and saying, okay, we're really rich, but, And today marks really significant change in the government, in all the policies, in really driving a change, in really reducing this dependence, and then really looking into new ways of basing the economy. So from resources-based to knowledge-based. What's interesting as well is based on the recent IMF report that Algeria growth is at 4.2% in 2023. It's expected to maintain this into 2024. But there is all these policies, all these reforms that have been put in place, and then also with your ministry, which has been created. It's really recent, since 2022. So just want to see with you that you can expand on this vision and strategy that Algeria has in general, but also like now through your ministry, and then really moving to a knowledge-based economy.
Indeed,
What's the strategy?
Algeria has been seen like a sleeping giant for decades. Our main problem was that we were suffering from the so-called Dutch disease for years. And the thing with Dutch disease is that when you rely on a rent, in our case hydrocarbons, it kind of prevents the government from doing courageous, efforts to diversify its economy, because it's basically irrelevant. I mean, when you do have a rent and all your, KPIs are green and your economy seems to go very well, you don't have, you don't feel the pressure to do courageous reforms and to seek for change. And I think many other countries in the MENA region are in the same situation as Algeria. And we kind of, have different approach on how to address this Dutch disease problem. So in Algeria, we finally understood at some point that our most important wealth is actually our talents and our youth. And that we were very bad at keeping them in Algeria and giving them opportunities. We have been suffering from brain drain for years. I know that I'm talking a lot of brain drain, but yeah, it's a real issue, because you cannot build an economy without talents. People who end up moving abroad are actually the people that we count on to be a source of change and economic development.
It's your human capital, right?
Yeah, the human capital is very important. And Algeria has been investing a lot in human capital. So education is free, higher education is free. We are a 45, 46 million people country with 12 million people who are in school and universities. So 1/3 of the Algerian today can benefit from a education system that is free, with very good quality, and the fact that many of them are very successful abroad is a good proof that the education system works pretty well. So we understood that we should put more focus on how to have a return on investment on the education system. So this question of a knowledge-based economy is currently at the heart of all the reforms. We want to build something around all the effort that the Algerian state has been implemented in decades in terms of education. So if you want me to go, deeper in details of what policy.
We'll go afterwards, maybe for more. How do you aim to really push for that knowledge-based economy? So, for example, you started in 2020, and so you had to build your ministry, you had to build your team, and then what are the steps that you have taken, and the next one to really drive this transformation?
I would say three things. Regulatory framework, funding, and support. And when I say regulatory framework, it's not necessarily about putting in place new regulation. In most of the time, it's about deregulating. So that's an interesting thing, because often, when you talk about innovation, the most interesting thing you can do is not to regulate, but to deregulate, because often regulation and innovation go in opposite direction. So we have been putting a lot of regulation, deregulation to make company formation easier, to help people to access to capital more easy, to create companies in a more convenient and more easy way, to raise money in a more easy way. We have been, like kind of disrupting some conservative sectors. For example, 2 years ago, we passed a law on the monetary law that basically opened the doors and opportunities for payment service providers and neobanks. In Algeria, we had a very conservative banking system with a monopoly of bank, and especially state-owned banks on the banking sector. So we finally understood that if you want to have a much more dynamic banking sector, if you want to have a modern mobile payment solution or e-payment solution, we had to introduce outsiders. So by passing this law, we opened doors for payment service providers, for neobanks. We even introduced a central bank digital currency, and even the regulation itself, of these activities is managed by a committee that is, you find half of the members are from the central bank and half of the members are experts from outside. So this is also some kind of, disruption. We believe also that public spending can really leverage technology and innovation. So we also changed the public procurement law in Algeria by introducing a more flexible way, to contract with startups and technology companies. And basically, the goal is to, have a larger part of our public expenditure that goes to technology and innovation. It works, if you know the Small Business Act in the US, so it's quite similar, but for startups. So now in Algeria, we want that a certain part of our public expenditure go to innovation and technology, because we believe that many technologies can be developed if there is a market, and because we have an economy that is orbiting around public expenses. So we believe that
involving
a larger part of this expenses should go to startups and to innovation. Very recently, like two weeks ago, we also had an insurance law that introduced insurtech and smart contract and blockchain in the insurance sector. So I can go with many things we have done in the last years to maybe change the regulation to open opportunities for startups. We have been also very courageous at implementing incentives for startups. And to just give you an idea, startups in Algeria are exempted from tax for the 5 first years of their formation, so they don't pay any tax. And that's important because we believe that it can really decrease the failure rate and of course reduce the tax pressure on them. In Africa, you maybe are aware about this trend of doing startup acts. We don't have a proper startup act. We have a set of bills that works like a startup act. So we are giving startups what we call a startup label, which is a document they can get online by registering themselves. And when they register themselves, they are completely exempted from tax for the 5 first years of their formation. Access to capital, as I said, is something very important for us. Unfortunately, what you noticed in Algeria and also in Africa is that startups sometimes struggle to access to capital, especially in the early stage period. So we created a startup fund called the Algerian Startup Fund. Currently, the fund is managing something around $500 million, and is investing in early stage startups up to $1 million per startup. So the goal is of course, to make it easy for Algerian startups to access to capital. But we have been also we worked on implementing, incentives for the private sector to invest more in startups. So, for example, in Algeria, if you invest in a startup, if you're a company doing corporate venture, or your investment are taken out from your tax. So you are giving tax credit for all the investment made in startups. And of course, the goal is to increase the investment from the private sector. We have also made it much more easy to start a VC in Algeria. It's now take less time and less bureaucracy to create a fund. And we started to witness an increasing activity in the VC sector in Algeria. But the thing is that what we noticed is that VCs or startups that manage to raise money locally in local currency want to be on, want to do the headlines on TechCrunch or other magazines. So basically, in Algeria and other countries in the region, even if there is a lot of effort to mobilize capital for startups in local currency, startups that manage to get some PR are mostly those who raise money from foreign VCs, mostly US VCs. So now we are aware about the fact that we should work more on PR. PR has been
is one of the weaknesses.
The weaknesses in Algeria. At the end of the day, I think that today the ecosystem is quite dynamic. The number of startups in Algeria in the last 3 years grew by 260%. So we are witnessing a very interesting growth, quantitative growth, but also qualitative growth. So we have also many local success stories that are expanding and scaling outside of our borders.
Yeah. So as you were saying, 260% growth. So what are your short-term and long-term objectives, right? So let's say in the next 2-5 years, with those startups. And again, you're looking at knowledge economy, but startups and SMEs as well. So what do you see in 2-5 years in terms of that growth from now, like right now, from this 260% growth? What are your ambitions and the objectives that you have?
The objectives is, of course, to have success stories, because success stories drive trust. And today, as I mentioned, yesterday Algeria is more open to foreign investment, and foreign investors usually look for success stories. I think you will have today also the chat with Nourdin, who is the founder of Yacine. I don't know if he is in the room, but. Yeah, Yacine is a good example of what the Algerian ecosystem is capable of, raising more than $180 million. A startup that is currently in like 6 or 7 countries in the world, with an Algerian team of engineers, and we started to witness some very disruptive startups. Even people coming, from, we are reverting brain drain, so we have even people coming from all other countries and going back to Algeria to create their companies because they believe that there is something happening in Algeria. So our goal is of course to reach a momentum in terms of investment in startups. For now, much of the capital that flows in the ecosystem come in a way or another from the public sector. With an interesting return on investment rate, and people are often surprised by the return on investment because it's a blank market with a little bit of concurrence. So the return on investment are quite high for now. The goal is, of course, to have more deals that are 100% from the private sector. We want to reach at least $1 billion in deals by 2028, which I think is a very reasonable objective to look at, especially with all the incentives we are implementing. And of course, we don't have quantitative objectives because I believe that it shouldn't be our concern. I mean, you can compare countries like Estonia. You know, they are 1,300,000 people, and they already have 13 unicorns. So we shouldn't, we should look at the right KPIs and not the wrong KPIs. We have other KPIs, like the fact that today, startups are helping us to keep our talents in Algeria, and especially engineers. And there is an interesting thing, I think you mentioned earlier, but the fact that most of them are female. In Algeria, most of our engineers are.
Yeah, I wanted to mention that because, here in the West, this is something you mentioned at the embassy, and I was really struck by that. In the West, we are trying actually to have the 30% in terms of the ratio of female representation, but that in Algeria, it's quite, I would let you mention it because this is quite impressive. So in terms of female CEOs or female CTOs above 50%. So I wanted to, if you want to mention that quickly.
So we did a recent study on the startup ecosystem, and what we found out is that 38% of the startup founders in Algeria are female. And if you add CTOs, the percentage goes to 51%. And the reason is very simple. For the second year in a row, Algeria is ranked the second country in the world in terms of female engineers. And for example, in computer science, we have much more female engineers than male engineers. Even in civil engineering, we have, like 64% of female engineers. So currently we are witnessing, even an increasing rates of female startup founders, which is, I think, a good thing. Even at our ministry, we have gender equality around 50%.
So you're definitely the model that the West needs to look into. Huh?
Yeah, I think it's a good thing because according to World Bank and the UN, the economy would benefit from gender equality. So I see it from an economic, perspective, from business perspective. We should have more female entrepreneurs and CTOs and so on.
Just want to touch now on trends and the industry that you see as pivotal for the growth. So just as an experience, I went to Algeria in 2019. It was 1 week before the start of the Hirak. And then I went back in October 2022 for 2 weeks, went to the Sahara, I came back. And what I noticed was this surge in dynamism, startup hubs. It was completely different. So it was very impressed, like within 2-3 years, gap. So I'd like to ask you, what are the trends in terms of sectors? And again, also with the SMEs that you're looking after, but then the industry that you see really as pivotal for the growth.
Sometimes the impact of technology is really, far from being reported by the press. For example, in Algeria, we have been struggling about the fact that 90% of our land is desert. So basically, and 90% of the population live in 10% of the total area in the north. And we had some struggle in agriculture sector to provide enough food, and we had to import many of the. So just to give you an example, there is 2 cities in the south of Algeria. One of them is called Oualid, and one of them is called Biskra. And in the last few years, the 2 regions became the main source of agriculture production in Algeria. temperature there are extreme. They can go up to 50%, 30 degrees, I mean. And today, these two regions, these two cities in the south of Algeria produce 40% of our agriculture production. But what is surprising is that they use a lot of technology. I've been talking, for example, with farmers from OUALID, and one of them showed me, his smartphone, and he basically is able to start irrigation using his smartphone, and his farm is completely, powered by solar energy. So it also shows the impact of technology on food security and agriculture. Many other sectors benefit also from technology. We have seen, technologies implemented in fisheries, technologies implemented in industry, and in oil and gas, in the oil and gas sector. So 2 years ago, we passed a bill which basically, people can take a leave to create their company. And if they succeed, it's okay. And if they don't succeed, they can go back and to their original role. And it worked pretty well. So, for example, we had many people working in state-owned companies or administration, especially in the oil and gas sector, who left their position, created their companies, and now they are successful entrepreneurs. We even had someone who worked in a state-owned company who created his startup like 3 years ago, and startup in the IoT sector. So basically, he provides sensors for the well control. And 6 months ago, he managed to get a $29 million contract with Sonatrach, which is quite a big contract.
Great achievement, yeah.
So, the impact of technology can be really interesting in all the areas, and that's why we are, trying to create opportunities for startups, and many of them are pivoting to access to these opportunities.
Yeah. So as you were, giving this example of the agriculture and, the technology used in the south of Algeria, and this is part of the innovations, you have 1% of GDP allocated to research, but then with the objective of having this increase to 4%. So this is, one of the largest milestones where you really have this focus on innovating, right, and creating new technologies.
Actually, in all the MENA region, the total expenditure in research and development don't exceed 1% of the GDP in almost all the countries. So all the countries are between 0.5% to 1%. Countries like South Korea or Singapore spend more than 4% of their GDP on research and development. And it's a good KPI to monitor, because total expenditure in research and development also means that you are spending a lot of money to have more innovative products, to produce more added value, to be more competitive. That your companies are investing in their core businesses. We in Algeria, we also are aware that we should rise in a drastic way the total investments in research and development, and to reach that goal, we introduced a lot of incentives, research and development credits. So companies in Algeria can have research credits that can go up to 30% of their expenses in research and development, and our goal is to reach 3% by 2028. We are also, we introduced PhD in corporate PhDs, so people, PhD students can also do their PhD inside the universities. Universities are now able to create the spin-offs, and we went from 4 spin-offs in 2020 to 170 spin-offs in 2024 that are providing, technologies for the industry. We are also, giving incentives for researchers. What you notice in Algeria, and I think it's the same case in many countries in the world, is that researchers are of course talented, but they don't want to go outside of their comfort zone. So we are giving a lot of incentive for researchers that do research with the industry. So all the revenues that scale-ups are generating go to researchers. So they have like the salary is doubled if they work with the industry. We are also covering all the expenses of IP for everyone in Algeria. We created a fund for that, and it has been pretty successful because according to WIPO, we are the country with the most important increase in patent registration last year. We doubled the number of patent registrations last year, and we doubled also 2 years ago. Because we believe that access to IP is something very important too. We are also building bridges between the academia and the industry, and between large corporation and startups. And just to give you an example, we implemented 2 years ago an open innovation program with tax incentives for companies that are externalizing parts of their research and development with startups. And they can also get a lot of tax incentives. Open innovation is becoming a trend. And there are many examples of very successful big corporations that ended up having more return on investment by externalizing research and development. I think the best example was Pfizer with BioNTech, for the COVID-19 vaccine, or maybe what Microsoft is doing with OpenAI recently. We are also, encouraging, big corporations to work more with startups, because in Algeria we have a lot of big companies that spend a lot of money in research and development without any, tangible results, and now they believe that they can have much more return on investment by, giving the chance to startups. So basically, this is one of the many, initiatives we have been working on in the last 4 years to open opportunities for startups.
Thank you, Your Excellency. I mean, in the interest of time, there are 2 topics I really want to cover. I mean, we did mention of how you are actively having startup participated in the public sector as well by having procurement and all the measures that are being put in place and helping them getting access to funding and support. Before touching on digital transformation and AI, to really as well talk about how Algeria has been opening to international investments. So for international investors or wishing to invest in Algeria, what are the measures that are being put in place, which are really much, like in line with the strategy here. So it's really something. I know there is the investment law that was passed for locals, but also very much for private investors, which was not possible previously. So, of course, one of the most important things we have done in the last years was the new investment law, because Algeria is opening its door for foreign investment. It wasn't the case like 10 years ago. I see Algeria as an underinvested, country in terms of foreign investments, because the potential is huge, but there is a lack of visibility and maybe sometimes PR. And all the investment that has been made in Algeria has been very successful. And there is also, if you analyze the total foreign investment that have been done in Algeria, you will notice that there is a concentration on some countries. For example, a country like Qatar invested more in Algeria than all the European Union together. And all their investment went very, very well. So we kind of finally understood that we should do more. We have more work to do to make Algeria a more interesting destination from an investment perspective. And we are giving a lot of incentives as well for investment. We are also digitalizing all the process
for the investors. So basically, everything can be done online. Access to information can be done online. Registering your company, getting tax incentives, everything can be done online because we believe that bureaucracy has been also a major obstacle for investment. We're also giving information, about investment opportunities in Algeria. Even access to land can be done online.
Borrowing, yeah.
So we also removed some unpopular regulation that in the past prevented many investors from investing in Algeria. And I think the most important one was the 51-48 ownership rule. Basically, in Algeria, in the past, if you want to invest in Algeria, you have to find a local partner that should have at least 51% of the shares. So this very unpopular measure was found also in other countries like the Emirates, which didn't prevent them from attracting investment. But we removed it in 2019. So we also get rid of all this very unpopular. So I think today Algeria is a very interesting place to invest in for many reasons. We've been talking about tax, we have been talking about regulation, but there are also other topics. And the other topics is that you can access to highly trained labor force that won't cost you as much as it would cost you in Europe. You would access also to a multicultural, multi-language country. Algerians do speak many languages, French, Arabic, English, Tamazight. In some areas, even in Algeria, you would even find people speak either Spanish or Italian. So, it's a multicultural, multi-language country that is on the same time zone as Europe. That's also very close to most European major cities. So with a good quality of life, with a good weather, it's sunny every day, even in December. So, having a sunny day in Algeria is not an event.
So one last topic, which is quite important.
Just to end up with a more interesting point is that Algeria is also a beautiful country. And because we are not, a touristic country, people are often really surprised when they come to visit Algeria for the first time. Really surprised. Because the north looks a lot like what you would find in the Mediterranean region, in the south of Europe. And when you go to the south, it's become more, African. So it's very interesting, the transition from the north to the south, from the east to the west. The food is good. We do have the best food in the region.
Thank you. So on digital transformation, we did touch on that, especially when you were talking about the monetary and banking system. The banking system in Algeria has been very conservative for a long time. There was no dynamic stock exchange history, and you're driving all of this change, with fintech. So I want to just really quickly, in the interest of time, and what is being done in terms of e-payment, also digital ID, all this aspect because you're going to be driving this change from banking, which is the cornerstone or the framework for all the economy and startups. So just giving a bit, an AI as well.
I will start by stock exchange. Once again, we are bad at PR. 1 month ago in Algeria, we had the biggest IPO in the history of Africa. So we had the $1 billion IPO. Did you hear of it? Yes, okay, I heard the yes, it's a good thing. Stock exchange is hopefully getting more dynamism very recently with, we introduced a lot of sit-on companies, and we have a plan to introduce even more companies, and, we are giving a lot more, incentive for people to invest in the stock exchange sector. As I said earlier, we had the banking sector that is very conservative. And we finally understood that if you want, to boost this sector, we have to introduce outsiders because we cannot count on, I don't have anything against banks, but in Algeria, banks are sometimes quite resistant to change. So to implement new, modern ways of payments, to implement digital banking, mobile banking, e-wallet solutions. So we introduced a lot of, regulation to make it possible, to create e-money companies, e-wallets companies, neobanks, PSPs, payment service providers, and so on. We are also investing a lot in digitalization. Digitalization has been, on the top of the agenda of the current government, with a lot of ministries that are digitalizing all their processes. So, for example, in our ministry, we launched a few months ago something we call the self-entrepreneurship platform. And basically, in Algeria, it's possible to start a business online without providing any paper. So it's a paperless platform, and we do even the KYC. So we do even the KYC online. We're also working on interoperability between the ministries, so we are exchanging data in real time. And I think the government are the most people resistant to change. So often when you have a new technology on the market, the last sector that will implement this technology would be the government. That's why we are still using fax in 2024 in most of the regions in the world, especially Algeria. So just to give you an example, also another example of why we should put more private sector guys in the ministry, I will tell you a small story about the ministry. When it was created, I was alone, so I had to understand how writing decrees works. And because I don't come from an administrative background, it was quite hard for me to understand how it was written. And I finally understood that it was not very different from a coding language, a programming language. So it was like learning Python or C# or I don't know. At the end of the day, we finally everyone understood how the writing bills and decrees worked. And very recently, we had a very interesting project at our ministry. At our ministry, we have some very weird position for a ministry. For example, we have a data scientist, we have a help desk team, we have IT support team, we have network engineers. So it looks a lot like a startup. We do stand-up meetings. We don't have a red carpet at the entrance of the ministry. And we work on some IT projects. And one of them, I think the most important, interesting one of them, is a project that is, it's a large language model that basically generates bills and decrees. So basically, you just put, information about what you want to implement, and it generates bills. We did the training on a large data set of all the bills and all the laws and the decrees that has been published in Algeria since the last 60 years, and now it's able to generate text in both French and Arabic, and without the hassle of asking help from people from the who did the law faculties. And I think this is a good example of how we can implement technologies even inside the government. If I leave the government one day, I think I would start startup in the GovTech sector, because now I see also the need of the government for technologies. And technology has been touching all the sectors, transport, logistics, payments, agri-tech, everything has been. But maybe the sector that is for now that's the least impacted by technology are governments, and it can be easily proved. You can go to any ministry office and see how similar it looks to a museum. And that's why I think we have to work more on this key issue of public expenses and giving more opportunities for startups to implement technologies inside the administration.
To make those changes. You're a very fascinating speaker and minister, and we were talking with some of the Algerians here community, and how they all said that you're so approachable, and this is how you're driving this change through your ministry. But really, this is like unseen even like in other ministries. So thank you so much. I'm just going to open the floor for just 2 minutes question, because I see Hamad looking at me with big eyes. So just, having 1 or 2 questions before we go.
Thank you. One of the things that you mentioned is incentivizing startups to work and bringing them investment. Access to capital is one of the biggest problems in the Middle East. You mentioned as a fact that recently there was $1 billion stock sale on the stock market. My question is, what are the exit opportunities for startups if there has only been one $1 billion company going on the stock market?
Actually, there is not only one, but it's the highest, IPO. I was mentioning this IPO because it's a pretty massive IPO if you compare to other IPOs that are done in the African stock exchange sector. So that's why I was mentioning this one in particular, but it's not the only one. And of course, stock exchange is a good way of exit. But it's not only about this IPO. I was monitoring, the IPOs in the last few years in Africa, and $1 billion is like, all the IPOs of 1 year, in most of African countries. So we have done this in 1 day. That's why what I was mentioning this particular, But we finally understood that stock exchange is something important and that we should really give a boost. In Algeria, we are having, this is not the topic, but in Algeria, it's possible also to raise money with stock exchange without being, listed. So there's something called the fundraising for company formation. And basically, people can come to stock exchange and ask for investors. And recently, we had a startup that managed to raise about $2 million in 40 days using this tool, which is also interesting. And I didn't also mention the fact that we were actually one of the first countries in Africa to implement crowdfunding. This is also a good way to raise money. But to go back to your question, I was giving this example just to give you the idea of currently what the markets in Algeria is capable of. It is not the only company in the stock exchange.
Just one more question, no more.
Thank you for this presentation. One quick question. Obviously, we're experiencing low growth in Western Europe. More investors are looking at Africa as an investment opportunity. But that represents more risk as well. And one of the risk investors may see is capital control, how you exit your investment from Algeria, and how easy it is to repatriate capital back in Western Europe. So just wanted if you could give us a bit of comments on this risk.
I think that pragmatic investors come to a country to make money. So sometimes we forgot basics of investment. So, in Africa, what we witnessed in the last years is that some countries that are seen as business-friendly countries are actually countries in which investors are not making money, are not able to take dividends because they have shortage in hard currencies, are not able to exit. So they are likely to be very, countries that are very permissive to capital, letting capital flow in. But when it comes to to out, it's become more a little bit hard. So Algeria currently holds the largest hard currency reserves in Africa. So we are the top country, and then you have South Africa and other countries. And when you see on the African landscape countries struggling with high public debt, especially foreign debt, and you compare them to Algeria, Algeria actually has zero foreign debt. So we are the least indebted country in Africa, and one of the least indebted country in the world, actually. So we have put in place a zero foreign debt policy since 20 years. And currently, I think that Algeria offers the most important guarantees for an investor: the ability to come and to make money, the ease to access to business, because it's much more easy to start a business in Algeria. And you can also see that all the major investments that have been done in Algeria are quite successful, and they have absolutely no problems in taking their profits, dividends, or even exiting. Just 2 years ago, we had a $1 billion exit from a telco operator in Algeria. So it went very fluently. So I think, people should really come to Algeria and see the opportunities that this country is offering. We have also seen that the movement of capital are trying to move from a region to another in Africa. At the beginning, in the startup sector, it was mostly the Western African with Nigeria, and then countries like Kenya. And I think the next place to be is North Africa, and especially Algeria, because of all the reasons I was mentioning before, and all the opportunities for you to make business and to make money in the country, and the fact that the market is quite interesting. There is also something I was not mentioning, is that Algeria is currently the country that is doing a lot of effort in terms of integration. We see ourselves as a door for the African markets, because we are very close to Europe, because we are a large country, the largest in Africa, and we are investing a lot in integration. We are opening flights to all the African major cities. We are building roads that connect Algeria to other African cities, African countries. The most important one is the Trans-Saharan road that connects Algiers to Lagos, but we have other roads, for example, the one that connects Tindouf to Mauritania, to Nouakchott. The optical fiber, project that connects also Algiers to Lagos. We are part of the free trade area zone, and we are investing a lot, to make Algeria like the door for the African market. So when you invest in Algeria, you don't only address the Algerian markets, but you have also the opportunity to address a very large markets, which is the African market. And we are trying to have, less boundaries for investment. And I think currently the current, investment climate in Algeria is reshaping in a very drastic way, and people should really come to see all the opportunities that my country is offering.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. I think you've given us, throughout the weekend, a very inspiring outlook on what Algeria is doing in disrupting its economy and transforming itself. This is the first time that we attended the LBS MENA, so we hope that it's going to be just the first one and more for the future to also really looking at the progress and all the outcomes. Before we go, I'd like to thank everyone who's been working in the back. So your team, your Chief of Staff, Sid Ali, Akbar, Nordine, and also in particular, thank you to the Embassy of Algeria, who have helped me quite a lot in having you come. So his ambassador, Mr. Yazid, and of course, Mr. Ahmed Salhi, without that. So thank you very much, Your Excellency. Please, one thank you to pleasing us.